Last week we began talking about the idea of being powerful, and specifically how we all have powerful people in our lives. People in positions of leadership or authority, and sometimes, just like in the movies, those leaders are awesome, inspiring, helpful, and encouraging. All the good stuff. And even if you're not always happy with the stuff that they ask you to do or the rules you have to follow, you trust them. You like them, you respect them. But at the same time, we all know what it feels like to have a real life example of a powerful person in authority who seems like they, well, shouldn't be a powerful person, right? Last week, we also talked about how Jesus is the best example of how we use power, and that he introduced an idea of an upside down kingdom with the way that he handled power and authority. But that leaves us with a question. What about when powerful people don't exactly lead like Jesus would? What would you do when a leader is lazy or disrespectful, wrong, or doesn't deserve the power that they have? What about the teacher who seems to care less about the actual students and only cares about the test scores and the grades? What about the boss who makes decisions that you definitely don't agree with and treats some of their employees really unfairly? What about the adult in your life who talks about being a Christian but also talks bad about everyone else on the streets? What do we do then? Are we required to be good followers of bad leaders? Does God actually want me to blindly follow someone who isn't kind, selfless, or respectable, or just because they're powerful? Or is it okay to ignore them? Is it a really big deal if I make fun of them? If the person is a bad leader, do I have to be a good follower? These are really good questions, and I bet all of us have asked them at some point or another. Dealing with people in authority that don't live up to their responsibility never goes away, even as an adult. It never goes away because the truth is, we'll always have people in our lives who have more power or authority than we do. And although this is complicated, the good news is that God has given us a starting point for how to respond in a powerful way to a powerful person, no matter how that person's using their power. In ancient Israel, there was a powerful king named David. But long before he was king, David had a lot of experience with some powerful people. As a kid, David's dad basically ignored him and overlooked him when deciding which of his own sons he would pick for a major opportunity. As a teenager, David faced off with a legit giant named Goliath who had been bullying the Israelite people. Not many years after that, David had to decide how to respond to the most powerful person at the time, the king. Let me give you a little background. God chose David to be the next king of Israel, but there was a slight problem. Israel already had a king named Saul, and Saul wasn't ready to leave. So King Saul decided that he needed to act. He decided to kill David. And what do you do when an evil king is coming for you? David ran, of course, for years, literally ran for his life. That's where we pick up with this story. Check it out. In case you're wondering if you heard that right, you did. King Saul takes 3,000 troops to go hunt down David, all because Saul was the type of leader who got jealous over success of those around him. The worst. Then, on the way, Saul walked into a cave and used the bathroom, but it's the same cave where David and his guys are really hiding from Saul. Now, they're tucked into the back of this cave, and Saul is all alone. So here was David's chance. Years of being hunted down finally came down to this moment. Saul had been an awful authority in David's life, and now David had the chance to do something about it. One slash of that sword, and David's problems would all be over. Even his own men were begging him to do it. But look what he decided to do instead. Weird flex, all of David's backup had to be confused. This was supposed to be the day when David finally got revenge, stopped hiding, and became king. But that's not what happened at all. In fact, Saul left that cave without ever even knowing David was there. And while David could have stayed hidden, instead he ran out after Saul and got his attention. He showed him a piece of cloth that he had in his hand. And at that moment, Saul knew that David had to spread his life. And what David said next explained it all. David could have taken down Saul right then and there. And if we're being honest, he probably had a good reason to do it. But what David realized is that even though Saul was powerful in authority that he had over David, there was a power that David had that Saul didn't. It was the power David had decided to have and what he decided his role would be in his own story. Here's what I mean. David quotes a saying he heard from growing up: evil people do evil things, meaning evil is as evil does. I'm not going to be one of those evil people, King Saul. You may be like that, but not me, is what David was saying. Saul may have been disrespectful, but David would not stoop to his level. Saul may be wrong and deserving of dishonor, but David knew that in honoring Saul, even he didn't deserve it. He was exercising his own power and ultimately honoring God. Talk about an upside down way to use your power. David could have used his power and used it to his advantage. But in God's upside down kingdom, David knew that the best way to use his power was for good. In fact, one way to say this is, in the upside down kingdom, honor is greater than power. We have the same opportunity, and we can choose to be honorable no matter what's going on around us. Their actions don't have to determine our response. Does that mean that we always obey, comply, always give in? Nope. David ran for his life. If he had done nothing, he would have died. He decided, however, that no amount of Saul's evil could force him to do evil as well. It wasn't worth it. He wouldn't become like the person that he was running from. But that isn't every time. Those are exceptions. Most of the time, teachers, coaches, or your parents won't ask you to do something that's illegal or immoral. But there will be times where their actions are not so great. When you're frustrated with them, when you feel like they could be better, when they disappoint you, in those moments, most important thing you can decide is who you want to be in response, not whether they deserve their power that they have or how they deserve to be treated. In other words, you can choose to be honorable no matter who is powerful. The truth is, we all know this is easier said than done. So to wrap up our time today, I want you to look at ways that you can be honorable no matter who is in power. Think about what you say and how you say it. Whether you're talking to a teacher, a parent, a coach, or someone else in authority, you can choose to speak in a way that communicates respect. If you must argue with your stepmom, you can argue in a way that's calm and uses words to find solutions, not to find ways to make the other one look stupid. Second, remember, they're human too. It's easy to see powerful people as not real people, but they're humans too. Coaches are gonna mess up, teachers are gonna make mistakes, and bosses are gonna get it wrong. And in those moments, you can respond honorably by treating them in a way that you would want to be treated in the same situation. And lastly, speak up. Like we mentioned before, sometimes the best way to be honorable is to speak up when something's not safe, or when you're being hurt, or when what's being asked of you isn't right or healthy. Knowing when to speak up or finding the right words can be tricky. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to speak up to a powerful person, I want you to make a plan for what that conversation looks like. Talk with your family, small group, landing leader. Those are the kinds of decisions you should never have to figure out alone. The thing to remember in all of this is God's inviting us to participate in an upside down kingdom in a totally different way of seeing power, because in the upside down kingdom, honor is greater than power. That means that you can be honorable no matter who is powerful. That can be difficult, but it is what Jesus modeled and invites us to be a part of. And I promise it's the best way to see and treat power when it comes to making decisions now that will help you grow in the best possible version of yourself. You can start living in that upside down kingdom today.